All right, good morning. It's time for us to get started. And you just heard the recording in progress, so we're off and running. Anyway, I hope you all had a good weekend. I hope you made some contacts. I hope that you had some time with family or whatever it is that you had on your schedule. I hope you were able to take advantage of that. So today you can see it says counters, amendments, and addendums part 2. So last Friday, we had part 1, and it was talking about counteroffers and then some of the amendments and addendums and things that happen during the course of a transaction or even upfront in a transaction, something that identifies different things that are going on. And today we're going to continue on that because we went through about, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them on Friday. And there's probably that many more that we didn't have a chance to get to, but I didn't want to try to run 20 or 30 amendments and addendums all in one class because not only would you guys doze off, but I probably would, and that wouldn't be bad for our recording things that are going on. So today we're going to talk about some additional counters and amendments. And again, I don't have them in any particular order. They're kind of in an order of importance and how often you come across them and things, but they are things that happen on a fairly regular basis. Not every contract has all of these things, obviously, but things do happen on a fairly regular basis, and we're good with that. So one of the questions that I have come up quite a bit is agents that want to involve another agent in their office or whatever. And that is certainly okay if you want to work with another agent, if you have another agent in your office that, and I don't know what that scenario is going to look like. I don't know if you're going away on a month-long cruise and you need somebody to take care of things while you're gone. And you want to make sure whether you actually want to have another agent fully involved in the entirety of your contract. But assuming that you have talked with an agent and you are in the process of doing whatever it is, maybe you just wanted help. Maybe you just took on a task that you felt like you needed a little more help with. Maybe it's, we've had one recently that the agent lived in, well, actually in Murrieta, and they had a property that they wanted to list for some friends in Adelanto. Well, that's a long drive. It's a long drive to do an open house. When I say a long drive, I'm talking probably the whole thing, depending on the traffic up the Cajon Pass or something, probably is 2.5 hours or something like that. Well, that's a long time to go up there to change out flyers, to make sure that the signs are still up, to go show property when people make the phone call based on a sign that you have up, or maybe you've talked to them and you set an appointment, you drive all the way up there only to find out that about 3/4 of the way up there, you got a text that said that they'd run into some family issues and they wouldn't be able to make their appointment. Anyway, there's a lot of things that go on. So what this agent did is this agent decided to work with another agent out of that area, at least an area that could service it more easily than he could. And so they basically worked out an agreement where there were going to be multiple associate licensees working with the seller. All right, that's what we're working with at this point in time. Now, if you were representing a buyer with more than one person, same type of thing applies. You just have to check the box that applies. If I'm listing a property and I'm going to list it with somebody else up there, we're going to be co-listing it. We're going to be working hand in hand. We check the multiple associate licensees working with the seller. If we've got a buyer that wants to buy something up there and we work out some kind of a deal with an agent up in that area, then there are multiple associate licensees working with this buyer. We have an agent in our company right now that very nice lady, works with investors primarily, and she is moving. However, her investors don't want to work with anybody other than her. So she actually is entering into one of these agreements right now to work with another agent on their dealings so that she can still be involved, even though it's going to be from out of the area. But, and she'll maintain a license and things in California, but she will have another agent doing a lot of the legwork. And that's up to them to decide how that's going to come out. And you can do that. It says multiple on here. I mean, there can be a lot. I don't know why there would be a lot, but you never can tell. The real estate licensees named below are conducting under the same broker. So the real estate broker name is Century 21 Masters. Maybe the team name is, and that's probably just going to be your name because you're not entering into a team and things. If you are entering into a team, the same type of thing applies. There's multiple associate licensees working with the seller. I don't know what your splits are, but if you have a team of 5 people, then you would have a team name, whatever it is, and you would have all of the agents involved in that team. If you can't get them all on here, then you just create another form and have more licensees. Now, I don't know of anybody in our organization right now that has a team of more than about 5 people working for them and things, but that certainly could happen. We have several teams that are made up of like 3 or 4 people or something similar to that. We have them in Oceanside. We have them in, well, we have them spread out place, Montebello and Los Angeles area and things. So whatever it is, we need to have something drawn up that says that the buyer or the seller, whichever one we're working with, understands that this is part of a team. These are the team members. These are the ones that will be working with. And then that puts them in place under the representation agreements and things that we have. All right. So you see on here, it says this form is only used to modify a buyer representation agreement. So you have a buyer representation agreement, BRBC, right? And it says that Terry Ryan is going to represent you in finding a home. And these are my team members or other agents. They're going to be helping me in that. And they get identified here. So that the buyer or the seller, if I'm working on a listing, it's for the seller. If I'm working with a buyer, it's for the buyer. But that represents their other agents there. All right, now maybe the agent is from a different brokerage. And I have had that happen before where I have, prior to our company growing to where it is now and things, I had a client that had a property in the Inland Empire and had a property in West Hollywood. Now, I felt entirely comfortable handling the one in the Inland Empire. I did not feel comfortable handling one in West Hollywood. Although the listing, the listing person, the person selling the property, wanted to make sure that I was involved somehow. So we just had this little thing signed here that says that I was going to be involved. What this is that here now we're dealing with perhaps a compensation breakdown. So what's that? So I get 35% and they get 65%. I get 50-50, whatever it happens to be. It's okay. It doesn't matter. There's no magic number to that. It's like, what are you going to do? And what am I going to do? And what value is that to the transaction? If you were just doing a straight referral, you'd probably do something like 25%, maybe 30 in some instances. But you're just giving somebody a name at that point in time, and then you're backing off. So that's a referral agreement. That's a separate agreement from this. But you could use this actually to identify the same thing. But if we're splitting it and splitting the work and everything else, then who are the brokers involved? Well, this is Century 21 Masters. This is Remax Empire, whoever it happens to be, and whatever their DRE number is. So we can split it up however we want. It's our business, right? We've said that before in a lot of different circumstances, that it's our business and we are the CEO of our business. And so whatever we agree to pay out or whatever the other broker agrees to work for, we're going to talk about that and we're going to come up with a number. And it's going to be in writing so that we know exactly what it is, so that there's no mix up down the road. Well, wait a minute, I've done more work than you have. Well, it didn't matter. That's what we decided on, was this was the amount. So we talked about the MLSA on Friday, just briefly. We kind of brushed over it and things, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things. That this is the multiple listing service addendum. And it actually probably wasn't in your file packet for Friday because it's in this one. But this talks about, this is any modifications or instructions that we're giving per MLS. All right, and this first part talks about what the MLS is so that we can review that with somebody listing a property. We can talk about the impact of opting out of the MLS, or we can have the sellers read that if they're well, I don't want everybody to know about it. Well, okay, that's an interesting way to think of selling your home, because actually we want as much exposure as we can. And the way for us to accomplish that is to make sure it gets on the MLS. From the MLS, there is going to be within a few days, there's going to be a major information grab from the MLS by a whole bunch of other third-party websites. And they're big ones. They're ones like Zillow, they're ones like Realtor.com, they're ones like Trulia. And so we're explaining this to people, that is where they get their information from. If you listed a property today and did not put it in the MLS, Zillow would have to get the information from you. They'd have to go through more pains than they're willing to take. They'd have to get it from some other source than the one that they usually go to, which is the MLS. So your property basically wouldn't be seen anywhere if it doesn't go on the MLS. So let's try to push people, and you don't have to push people too much. They understand. For the most part, sellers understand that it's on the MLS. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of things here. This clear cooperation policy, this is something that's established by the MLS. And we have questions asked on a regular basis. Well, I took the listing Friday. How soon do I have to have it in the MLS? All right, so here we go. We took it on Friday, and that it says here that it be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. So I put a sign up in the front yard on Friday. We hit Saturday and Sunday, which it's a business day for us. However, you could probably get away with a Monday input on that because the MLS itself is not open. Our ability to enter information is, but the MLS and the people that are reviewing and identifying and things are not. Bottom line is that put it in the MLS as soon as you can. They emphasize 1 business day because they want it in there for sure by then. When you put it in, you have to put it in with 1 photo. Somebody says, well, I'm not going to have my photographer out there until Wednesday. Well, that doesn't give you 3 extra days to put it in the MLS. All right, so coming soon. This also describes coming soon just a little bit, and what is the impact of coming soon? Well, from our standpoint, if somebody says that they need a couple of extra weeks to get things ready, it would still be in our best interest. When I say our best interest, I'm talking about us brokers and things. It's in our best interest to go ahead and get the listing today, because once they sign, they have put everything into a contract form and they are committed, right? We're committed, they're committed, everybody is committed. But you're not going to be ready for 2 weeks. And so what I can do is in the MLS, and still we're talking about the MLS addendum. In the MLS, I can put it in as coming soon, which means that it's not being marketed in the MLS yet to the public, so to speak. And it's we have up to 21 days to complete any work that you felt like you needed to have done prior to it becoming active on the MLS. Your days on market are not impacted by that because you're not on market yet. you have decided to make it coming soon. So your days on market are gonna start when you actually release it on the MLS. Okay, so right here, if they say, no, I don't want to do that, then check this box that says does not authorize broker to market the property per coming soon. Okay, so we're telling the seller is telling us not to do that. We're ready to go, or we'll be ready to go by Tuesday or whatever it happens to be. All right, so we're not ready to go yet today. We don't want to do the coming soon thing, but we have a date in mind, like we'd like it on, we took the listing on Friday, we'd like it to go on the market Tuesday. That'll give us the weekend to get the carpets cleaned and finish the painting in the bathrooms or whatever it is that we're gonna do. That gives us a weekend to accomplish that. So seller instructs broker to exclude, that means keep it out of the MLS, right? And to begin marketing actually on such and such a date. So Tuesday is the whatever, I don't know, today, Tuesday's the 5th. So the seller instructs us to begin marketing the property to the public on August 5th. Or they have that one last thing, and this one we don't like, but it does happen occasionally, and that is not to market the property to the public during the listing period unless seller gives us written instruction afterwards. All right, so if they give us a date here, then that is considered written instruction. If they check this box and then sign this form, they've told us to exclude it until a certain date. If they sign here, they're telling us not, if they check this box and sign, they are telling us not to market the property at all on the MLS. And there are people that say that, unfortunately. Seller understands and agreed that should any public marketing of the property occur, the property listing will be submitted to the MLS within 1 day. So if all of a sudden you're out there holding open houses and you've got flyers going out and you're posted on the internet and Facebooking and all that kind of stuff, then, or the seller does that to themselves or anything, then we have to put it on the MLS. That is our clear cooperation policy. We are cooperating with the MLS and with other brokers in the area. We're not walking around with lots and lots and lots of pocket listings that make no sense. They're only done out of greed and not because the seller actually wants them. Clear cooperation policy does not apply. The MLSs utilized by the broker do not have clear cooperation policy that applies to the property. Broker shall disclose and obtain seller's consent for any instruction not to market the property to the public. Okay, so we check this box that says doesn't apply. We're not going to market this to the public, period. But that's up to them to sign off on it. So obviously we want it to go on the MLS as soon as possible. We, the agent, we, the broker, we want it to go on the market. We know that the more exposure a property gets, the better chance it has of selling. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to help the seller sell their property. So we want to move this forward. We don't want, these things are all pretty much negatives to us. And this one is not too bad of a negative because it usually has a date that we can put in our mind and in our calendar and everything else as to when it can all happen. But in the meantime, we've lost several days, we've lost a week, we've lost 2 weeks, whatever, of marketing to the outside. Maybe that's better. Maybe the property was in a condition that really shouldn't be marketed yet. But we have to make that determination along with the seller. All right, so then, as I told you a minute ago, MLS makes it available to the additional internet sites. And so they send it out to all of the other people, or they don't actually send it out, it gets scraped. And if you don't want that to happen, you have to check this box. And then they the MLS can actually refuse to let that information go way public. It'll be on the MLS and it'll be available to realtors and whoever realtors share it with, but it would not necessarily be available to Zillow and all of those others. Again, I don't know why you would do that, because to me, the more exposure the property gets, the better chance it has to sell. The more people that know about it, the better chance it has to sell. And that's what we're trying to accomplish anyway. So here's another seller instruction, the last one, and that is that visitors are not restricted from taking pictures of the property. That is the default. So when they sign this MLSA form, they are giving agents or buyers or something the opportunity to take photos. Maybe they're taking photos for, maybe it's a one spouse taking photos for the other one who lives in another state, and they're just going through job transfers, and you try to find something, send me photos, things like that. Okay, so this is giving people permission to take pictures of the property. There are people that don't want that to happen, so it at least has to be discussed. But there are people that have really expensive houses with really expensive stuff inside, and that hopefully is still going to be controlled by the kind of visitor that the agent brings, or by the people that show up at an open house. But if they are totally not restricted, it means they could take pictures of all of the, I don't know, Zing vases. Maybe that's not even a Ling vases. I don't know. There must be something that's expensive, and then you go through there, and then that information, the more pictures you take and things like that, the more people that have that information as well. Or seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking images is limited to those persons preparing an appraisal or inspection reports. So you actually can refuse to let the potential buyers and things take pictures of the house. And you can check that box, and then you'll put it in the remarks. You'll put it in the private remarks in the MLS. But that's the seller instructing you. That's not you taking it upon yourself to make those decisions. All right. Next form. And we touched on this briefly the other day, but I could tell by a couple of phone calls and emails that I got afterwards that that we didn't cover it quite well enough. So we're going to cover this one, because we're going to cover another one that's like unto it anyhow. But this is a contingency for the sale of a property. So I'm buying a house, and I have to sell my property at 345 Training Tool Way in order to be able to buy Banana Peel Way. So this is the seller's property. This is the property that I have to sell. So the buyer's property, this agreement is contingent upon one of these three things: either the buyer entering into a contract for sale and closing escrow on my property, or if I check this box, it's only entering into a contract for the sale of the property. So if I feel confident in the offers that come in, then obviously number two would work fine. Or only on the close of escrow of the buyer's property, which is already in escrow. And obviously that is our preferred one, because that one is already in escrow. It has an escrow number. It has an estimated sale close of escrow date. So we're all shooting towards something now that will happen. And if for some reason this house that's at that's 8899 KJ escrow number falls out of escrow, I have 2 days to give the seller information that happened. Okay, so that's the length of time that I have. Within 2 days, I will deliver something that says that this deal canceled, because that impacts them, right? Now I don't have a property in escrow anymore, but it's still on the market. So hopefully I'm going to sell it again, and we feel real confident that it'll sell. We're already putting calls into some of the multiple offers that we received. Whatever that case is, you at least are letting the seller know they don't need to be just kind of strung along and say, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna tell them because then they'll turn around and sell the house. Well, okay, so how long can we hold them off for that? Well, let's talk about that. So here's the buyer entering into the sale of the property. Buyer shall have, and this is defaulted at 17 days after the acceptance of the contract, to enter into a contract for the sale of their property. Now, if this one is met, then we're in good shape. If one of the others aren't, then we haven't done it yet. This is only entering into the contract, but that hasn't happened yet. So we have 17 days as a buyer to find another property. We're just out scrambling. We're looking for whatever we can do. We're letting people come to our house. We're doing all of the work that we had to do ahead of time. Whatever it is that they're doing, they're working on trying to sell their property. And the idea is that within 17 days, they shall enter into a contract. Now, does that say it has to close escrow? It does not. It says they have to enter into a contract. And then obviously, from that point in time, if they did enter into a contract within 15 days, for instance, bingo, you let the seller know that, hey, we're under contract now, and here's the escrow information, and you provide, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence to seller and the other escrow holder that says that we are now in escrow. So we're ready to rock and roll and move forward on this property. This is probably the weakest one, and that is that buyer has signed a listing agreement for buyer's property or shall within 3 days after acceptance. So here's somebody that's out looking for a property and they haven't even listed theirs yet. They're just thinking about it, or they want to wait until they find another house or something. So that's pretty weak. You know, I'm going to go out and look for a house and I'm going to make it contingent upon the sale of my house, which I might list if I get this one. And does that happen? Absolutely, it does happen. But is it a great idea? It's a weak idea, is the best I can say. You may have had a property on the market for a really long time. Your seller is getting anxious. They've made several price reductions, whatever's going on in the transaction time that's going on during the listing. And they may be prepared to just go ahead and accept a contingency agreement based on a pretty wide open just based on pretty wide open ideas, based on some things that everybody hopes will happen but hasn't happened yet. So anyway, within 3 days, so either I'm going to sign an agreement or within 3 days I'll sign an agreement with so-and-so brokerage. So you're going to sign a deal, you get something from Remax Real Estate, and they say that they are in the process of listing the house. So they have to identify that right here. Or buyer's property is or will be submitted to the MLS in the geographical area where the buyer's property is located, or buyer's property will not be submitted to the MLS, which is silly to me. I don't know what circumstance would present that. I'm going to put it in the MLS in where? In Sonoma, when the property I have is in San Diego. Not likely, so it probably doesn't make sense, but sometime or another, somebody's going to have something like that happen. You won't use that often, if ever. Buyer shall deliver seller evidence of both the listing agreement and the applicable MLS within 1 day. So we get the offer accepted. We told them that we would get the offer list. We would get the listing done within a day, or maybe the same day, or maybe it's already done and just waiting to see if they find a house. Who knows what the situation is. But within 1 day after listing, they need to get me information not only that shows that they have a listing done, or I need to have something showing that it's going to be done, or it's just finished now, or whatever the case may be. They need to know that it's listed. It's up to us to identify and send out the information on that. So here's close of escrow. Buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the buyer's property. Schedule close of escrow of seller's property no later than 5 days prior to the scheduled date of the seller's property. So once we know, once everything's rolling, once we have it in escrow, once everything's done, then we need to have an escrow date so that the seller can prepare to move out, because they need some time. They can't just all of a sudden hear at the last minute or anything. And so once that's done, once that information is given things, the buyer can no longer use that as a contingency to cancel the agreement. So their deposit is potentially up for grabs at that point in time. And status, and this is something you're going to do anyway, but everybody agrees to keep everybody informed on the, including any changes or modifications, change of dates, anything that's going on, and certainly a cancellation if that happens. After acceptance, seller shall have the right to continue to offer the property for sale for backup offers. Okay, now you know in the MLS, one of the options for status recording is active under contract. So if we are in a situation where we have a signed contract or a contingency or something, then indeed at that point in time, we can leave it on the market as active, but we have to identify it as active under contract. And by identifying it that way, they know that something's going on with it. They know that it's in escrow already, or that they have a contract already on it or something. But they could still write backup offers if they wanted. They could do the backup offer addendum, and they could put it in with the offer and understand that if this deal falls apart, they want to move forward. Now, what advantage is that? Well, a couple of advantages. One is it's not going to stop the buyer from continuing to look for property, more than likely. There, until they get something that shows that they actually have a property, they're going to want to keep looking. But at the same time, if this deal, this first deal that's in place falls apart, maybe the buyer's deal falls apart, and it's a little domino effect. The buyer's deal falls apart, so the seller's deal falls apart. So if we have another offer in place in a backup position, that is securing that position, we can just move that in with everybody signing off on it, things, of course, but we can move that in, and now that becomes the new offer in place. Contingencies on proof of funds. So if seller accepts a backup offer and provides the buyer a copy of signed accepted backup offer within the time specified in 7C, which is 2 days, and gives written notice of funds and things, the seller may use the bottom of this page or the bottom of the next page to remove this as a contingency. Maybe they already have the money lined up from somewhere else. Maybe if this doesn't, if his offer doesn't go through, he still has the opportunity to get a bridge loan. He has the opportunity to borrow money for a short time from a hard money lender. He has money that his parents will give him to close on a house. Whatever the case may be, he may be able to continue with the deal anyway. He just wanted it to go this way. He wanted to be able to sell his first house in order to buy his second one. But it's not necessary. It's not mandatory. He has other options. Good credit, high income, low debt ratio, and he still has the money to do what he wants to. So we have the opportunity. By default, it says immediate right to notify buyer after acceptance. All right, so if there's any problems, we can immediately notify them, or delayed right to notify. So they have a 17-day time period, or something else that you can type in here in this blank spot to let somebody know that hey, we're canceling the deal. You have to remove your contingencies, or we're canceling the deal. I'm going to send you a contingency removal to remove the contingency as a condition of this sale. Or the last one, which is not one that we like to look at as a seller, but that is no right to notify the buyer. Seller shall not have the right to invoke the provisions during the entire term of the agreement. So if we have a 35-day agreement, if we have a 45-day agreement, whatever it happens to be, then we have that entire time to remove that. That contingency for the sale of a property remains in place for that entire time. So we have to pay close attention to what we do on that. People sneak that in. It's down here at the bottom. It's a nice little checkbox right here that nobody even has to fill out any additional information. But you have to take a close look at what the seller is trying to accomplish and whether that works into their schedule to know that for the entire 35, 45, whatever it happens to be days, you can't remove that. This contingency can only be removed in writing. So that's the way it has to be taken care of. The seller and the buyer both have a right to cancel. Seller's right to cancel has to do with you're not getting your stuff done. Whatever the stuff done, that's the items that are in the contingency section of your RPA. Are we getting any of those things done? Are we living up to? Did we get our money in that we were supposed to? Have we signed our escrow instructions? Have we put things together? If not, we preface it with the notice of buyer to perform, notice of buyer to perform, notice of buyer to perform, notice of buyer to perform. Once notice of buyer to perform is done, and either they do perform or they can't perform, then you have 2 days after the notice of buyer to perform. And then you can cancel the deal again in writing. All right, buyer's right to cancel. Buyer may cancel the agreement in writing if prior to the buyer's removal of buyer's property contingency specified. Okay, buyer is unable to enter into a contract on the buyer's property in the time specified. So we had 17 days to accomplish that, and we just don't have any offers. And we've reduced our price, we've done various things, but we just don't have any offers. Or same thing is buyers unable to close escrow. Obviously, if they don't have it in escrow yet, they can't close escrow. Now, do we have options here? Of course. We come across it a little bit later. There's an extension of time addendum that we're going to touch on in just a few minutes. And so time can always be extended if everybody is amenable to extending it. If it works out in everybody's life, if it works out in everybody's financial situation, tax situation, whatever it happens to be, we can do extensions, and actually should do extensions anytime for any reason that a deal is not going to come together the way it's supposed to. Something is not happening when it's supposed to. We can either, once a notice to perform is given, we can cancel it, or we have the opportunity at that point in time for somebody to file an extension. All right, so here's a funny one, but it happens. Okay, it's not funny because it never happens. It's funny because it's just funny to me. But sellers, and this kind of goes hand in hand with this contingency to sale buyer's property. Well, here's a seller. Sorry, my mouse is working with my finger very well, whatever that is. Anyway, so the seller wants to sell their house, but they don't want to sell their house unless they have a house to move into. Well, that's reasonable, right? But do you have to own the house you move into, or can you do a rental, or can you do whatever? But the bottom line is, if somebody tells you that they need to find another home before they can sell their house, you can still put it on the market, but in the remarks, the private remarks, you write in there that any offer will be considered, but is subject to sellers finding a replacement property. And we send this out with the signed offer. When somebody sends us an RPA, we accept it. Everybody loves it, except for this. They didn't know about this little part, maybe, or they didn't pay attention to it, or they thought maybe it was done by now, or whatever. But it's the same thing. So the seller has the opportunity to go find a property. Now, how much time do they have to do that? Or are they already in escrow maybe? Kind of the same things, time period wise, that exist in the conting, the buyer's contingency, right? Seller has entered into a contract already. Here's the escrow holders, 21st century escrow, escrow number 8889. KJ, whatever it happens to be. So that's in place, so we know that they've already found their replacement property. Obviously, we have to close on it, so this box would probably be checked. If you're filling one out, you may be already in escrow, so you check this box right here. But you still need that money in order to buy your other property, so you check that box to indicate that this agreement is contingent on seller's ability to close escrow on the replacement property. And the reason for that statement is that so that somebody's not held to buying the property. If they sold their property and it's in escrow and it's rolling along and all of a sudden falls apart at the last minute, well, I can't be held to buying that. I can't be held to selling my property if I don't have one that I can buy yet. So you see how that kind of transitions a little bit. If they don't have a place to move, then they don't have a place to move. That's pretty obvious. I don't have a house. There's nothing going on. Maybe you've had this conversation with them already, and hopefully you have that conversation with them up front. When somebody is listing their property and they say, well, I have to find a property. Well, that's good in a way, because guess what? I'm here. I'm an agent. I could go out and show you other properties. So I have a chance to help you find another property. Plus, I have a chance to help you get this one sold. So I'm kind of in control of both situations. However, the pressure is also on me for both situations. So I am looking at what's going on out there. We're showing property immediately if I don't have one already in escrow. And but I needed to close. I needed to close in order for the other one to close. So, excuse me. Time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingency, covenants, close of escrow, and other obligations that commence from the date of acceptance shall begin the day after the seller delivers a written notice removing finding replacement property contingency. Okay, so they're not required to pay for and do a whole lot of inspections until they know that they found their replacement property. So if it's a 17-day replacement period, then that's wonderful. We have 17 days to find you a property. And once we find you the replacement property, then we can start our inspections on the other home. So one is based on the other one happening. Buyer's deposit shall be delivered within 3 business days. That doesn't change. We still have the deposits that have to be in place. The reason those are in place is not just it's part of it is to show that you have some money to close escrow. But the other thing is there could be damages as a result of all of these things. We've got one out of Temecula office right now that is, they already did termite work and they already did some of it was a manufactured home and they had to be put on a permanent foundation. So it was already put on a permanent foundation. So the seller already has money out of his pocket because of an offer that came in from a buyer. And then one of them fell apart. And so as one falls apart, the seller still has money out of pocket. And it was to take care of this buyer. Now, do they automatically get it? Of course not. Everybody has to sign off on things, but is some of it maybe due? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it also increased the value of the manufactured home to a point now where the next person coming will now be able to get a loan on things because it has a foundation in place. So all these conversations have to take place during each deal, depending on what's going on. All right. Close of escrow, parties agree that seller may extend. We talked about that just a minute ago. And that is that you may extend the close of escrow. You may extend anything. You may extend contingency periods. You can extend all kinds of things. You just have to do it in writing. It can't be me talking with the other agent and having them say, yeah, that works for us. And they go, okay. and then it's moving forward. No, that's not the way it works. The way it works is same way with the other one. Except for this is notice the seller perform, notice the seller perform. And then we can move through and everybody has the right to cancel if we want to, or they possibly could keep reasonable out-of-pocket expenses if somebody spent money for all these things and now I'm backing out of it, but you've already had an appraisal done and you've already had inspections done and you've already had things done. There may be money out of both people's pocket. Maybe there were inspections done that uncovered a couple of things that the seller took care of. Everybody thought it was all going to come together. And then for some reason, the deal is going to fall apart. And everybody understands that. So we all sign here. Well, buyer and seller sign here. All right. So this has come up quite a few times in the last little while. And I'm not going to go to a lot of detail with it, but I want to at least make you aware that it exists. If by chance the seller is selling a unique property, or maybe a property that is going to be hard to get financing on, or maybe needs extra financing on, or whatever, we have the opportunity to do a seller financing addendum. Seller financing addendum means that either all of the purchase price or part of the purchase price or whatever is going to be financed by the seller. It's called owner carry. You've heard that term probably. Owner will carry, owner may carry part of it, whatever it happens to be. That all has to be in writing, which is where we start here. Principal amount. How much is the seller going to carry? Well, maybe the house is $500,000 house, and the people are, and they're going to, they being the seller, is going to finance on behalf of the buyer $200,000 out of that $500,000. Whatever the amount is. So you click the principal amount, you write in the amount here, what's the interest rate, how much are the payments going to be. You probably know where to find that, but if you don't, you can find it with a escrow company who can help do a net sheet with you. Or you can go to the MLS and go to finance and you can do your own amortization thing. And we get into that when we go through navigating the MLS, but you can call anyway, one way or the other, we can get those numbers. It all depends on what the seller is willing to finance and what interest rate they're ready to finance it at. Do we require a loan application and credit report? Well, probably, depending on how much money is involved. And how many days do we have to accomplish that? And then we move through the regular things that would appear on any kind of a contract. Are there late charges? Is there a balloon payment? A lot of times what somebody does here is they'll have an amount, $200,000 interest at 6%, and you're going to pay approximately this much, but the balance is going to be due in 10 years instead of 30. All right, so then you have a balloon payment coming up because we're going to owe some more money in 10 years or 5 years or whatever it happens to be. What if they want to prepay it? All right, well, you can do a prepayment. However, there is a California rule in place that says that on 1 to 4 unit residential properties, there are prepayment penalties that could hit your taxes and things like that as well. So due on sale just means that if the property is sold, if the guy buys it and 3 years from now or 4 years from now, he decides to sell and he still owes you a balance, whatever that happens to be, you the seller, then that balance has to be paid off when it closes escrow. Hopefully whoever does one of these is smart enough to go on title as a second lien holder so that they can't sell it without you getting paid. All right, if there's a notice, this is a request for a notice of default, so they have a first loan. You know, this was a $500,000 property. They're borrowing $200,000 from the seller and they're taking out a loan from the a lender for another 250, and they're coming in with 50 of their own, or whatever those numbers happen to be. But whatever those happen to be, if I'm in second position, I want to receive notice of default if by some reason they're not paying their first. Because who's going to get hurt first? Me. It's not the first one to get hurt, it's the first one to get hurt, not the first one to get paid. Anyway, so I want to know about delinquencies, I want to know about default. I want to make sure that tax service comes to me. I want to know that property taxes are being paid. And all of these things I want to know that are getting taken care of. And like I said, we're not going to go through the entire contract right now, because from here on, we go through a lot of the numbers. And those numbers, doesn't do us any good to throw numbers out there now, because actually we don't have any of those numbers. And so it's detailed as far as that goes. This is kind of your certificate of disclosure that a lender would provide. And it has most of the information on here so that somebody knows what is going to happen. We also have some borrower and co-borrower information if we decide we want to check occupation, if we want to check their employers, if we want to know these things, then we get them all down. All right, so caution. If seller financing requires a balloon payment, the seller shall give the buyer written notice according to the terms of Civil Code. At least 90 and not more than 150 before the balloon payment is due. So if you're the seller or you're representing a seller and they want to know about all of that stuff, then this helps identify those kind of things. And that's enough for that. Like I said, we'll go through those if you get one. We went through one the other day with somebody, and it's easier to go through when we actually have all the numbers that everybody's talking about. But this will print out, when you print out this seller financing addendum, it's also going to print out this disclosure. The disclosure just goes through and basically talks about what you have to do or what you should be or anything else. The seller finances only one property in any 12-month period, and the seller is a natural person, a trust, or an estate. Seller did not construct the property. The financing or fixed rate cannot adjust for 5 years. Anyway, any of those kind of things. And it's just kind of an overall disclosure to a seller that's considering doing financing. We want to make sure that they understand what the rules and regs are. And so there's the 4th page of this is the disclosure. And it talks about what they need to reference with their accountant or whoever it is that they're talking with. All right, assumed financing. You know, we're not getting into very much of that right now. However, there is a little bit of it starting to go on. Now, why do you think it's going on? Well, I'm not looking for an answer. I guess I'll just tell you the answer. But you know, there were a lot of people that 3 years ago or 4 years ago or somewhere in that neighborhood bought a house and took out a loan. And when they took out the loan, the interest rate was 3.75%. Well, guess what? The interest rate today is closer to 7. It's like a high 6. So is 6 better than 3.5? And the answer to that obviously is no. 3.5 is better. So there are people that are looking. In fact, we filled out 2 of these in the last week that I know of. And that is that they were assuming the financing of the first. Now, one of them was a VA and the other one was a regular FHA, but they were both trying to assume. Now, a buyer has to understand that a couple of things go on with financing, and that's why we have this financing addendum, is that when they try to assume the loan, and I say try because the buyer has to have approval by the financing institution. Whoever the lender is that loaned them the money or that owns the note right now, holds the note right now, they will have the buyer do a pre-qual for them, just like if you were going out and getting new financing. And the lender who's doing the assumption, they're going to look to see if they have enough money to pay the payment on assuming the first. Now, what that leaves generally is it leaves a balance. The balance may be, and when I say that, I mean if the house sold for, I don't know, $500,000, we'll just use that number, $500,000, and the people put 10% down, so they financed $450. They've been paying on it for 3 years, so now they owe $430. So, and now the house also has gone up in equity, and so the equitable value of the home is now 6 instead of 5. Well, so now we have $100,000 worth of equitable, and we have about $90,000 worth of value that has been paid off either through down payment or through amortization. So we're off by like a couple of $100,000 or something. So in order to assume the first, because the only thing they're assuming is the balance that's due on the first, that's what the assumption would be. So where is the money coming from for the rest of that $190,000? Well, it could be a combination of cash that the buyer has. Be nice if it were all cash that the buyer has. Then that assumption would go pretty easy. If the buyer is having to get a second loan on that $190,000, then they'll pay today's interest rates, which are, like I said, maybe 6.8 or whatever. And they'll pay the interest rate on that 190 that they borrowed there. But they will be paying the 3.5 or 25, whatever I said, on the first. So they're paying 3.25 on the first. They'll still be paying today's interest rate on the second. And whatever that happens to be. So you can see that it could still be a savings, because instead of having to finance the entire $600,000 or $570,000 at 6.83%, they are only financing maybe 180 or 90,000. So there's advantages to that. Not all loans are assumable. Here it talks about a couple of things. Seller shall, within 5 days after acceptance, request from the lender copies of all applicable notes, deals, and loan balances and current interest rates. So you're going to be talking with the other lender. The other lender being the initial lender, the one that actually holds the first place on the loan. They'll continue to pay or hold the first place on the loan, by the way, and they don't give that up just because you had to take on another loan. But if it's an assumption of a VA loan, the seller is contingent upon being provided the release of liability and substitution of eligibility, and they're advised to carefully investigate the substitution with eligibility. Now, what that means, just a little bit, and you're talking to a seller and a buyer, but seller at this point in time, is that a seller who has a VA loan on his property has an eligibility requirement he had to meet while he was doing his service or she was doing their service. And they got to a point of eligibility, and I don't know what that eligibility was. Evidently, on the numbers that I just used, we'll say the eligibility was $500,000. And so they were able to buy that. Now, what happens is if somebody assumes that loan, the veteran's eligibility remains tied up until that loan is paid off. It can be paid off through refinancing. It can be paid off through, 30 or however many years are left on the loan or whatever. So there's ways that it could be paid off. But in the meantime, it ties up that veteran's eligibility. And so if he were eligible for $500,000 at that time, and he's letting somebody assume his $500,000, then make sure that he realizes that he can't do another VA loan. Unless his eligibility was $1 million and he only used 500, then they can talk about it differently. But if his eligibility was 5 and he took out the entire 5 for the loan, then his eligibility is tied up until that second person, the one who assumed it, is paying off the loan. So it affects their eligibility. So everybody needs to find that out right off the bat. Seller shall within 5 days find that out. So they'll get a hold of the lender and they'll find out all of those things that are made there. And that may change their mind as to whether or not they want to let the loan be assumed. Like I said, maybe it won't matter to them because they've got more eligibility than that. Maybe they're not going to use VA financing again, so it doesn't matter to them. Whatever the situation is, they have to know. All right, let's talk real quick. We're running out of time again. Modification of terms on the buyer representation agreement. So I've had people that have been up and down and a little confused about the buyer representation agreement. You know what that is? BRBC, we call it, right? And it's a representation and broker compensation. Those are the two things that we identify on there. And you can change that agreement anytime during the course of the agreement by using a modification of terms. So the expiration of the agreement can be changed to, and you can modify that, but you can't change it to longer than 90 days or 3 months, I guess, after the expiration of it, but you can't extend it. So we're getting towards the end of it. We still haven't found them a house. We're looking day and night and all those kind of things. Everybody's agreed that we want to continue this relationship. So you can modify the terms of the buyer agreement and change the date. Compensation. Well, we're going to change our compensation. Compensation is going to be changed from, I don't know, and I'm just throwing numbers out. These aren't cut in stone or anything, but say you were going to do it for 2%, but now that you've spent 3 months working on them and things like that, you think it should be 3, or you think it should be 2.5, or whatever. You can modify that. You can modify it to different properties. So we had some properties maybe identified in the BRBC, or maybe we didn't. Maybe we just had a county or a city or whatever. You can change any of those things. The location is changed to Riverside and San Bernardino County. Or maybe the property type is changed to, I was looking for working ranches and now I just want acreage. I can make it a working ranch on my own. Whatever you can change, whatever you want to change, you can change with this modification of terms. Okay. These next couple I really don't like very much, but that's personal preference. I know it still happens. And that is that a buyer says, well, the house is vacant and I have to start moving out of my house. So can I move some stuff into the house that I'm buying? And my answer always is probably not, but let me check with the seller. Because it's the seller's decision. It's not up to you, but you're the one they're going to ask, of course. And so the buyer asks you if they can move in early. And you go to the seller's agent and you say, hey, here's our situation. They have to be out of their house by such and such a day. And it looks like we're not going to close until a couple of days after that or whatever. And we actually have to do something different. This is not meant to just be a convenience thing, okay? So make sure that it's a have to and not a want to when you get around to it, because when you get to the want to, that's when it becomes an issue. All right, the buyer has granted a license to store personal property on the property prior to close of escrow. So it's going to close escrow on the 15th of the month, but they want to move some stuff in there this week or this weekend or whatever it happens to be. Then I can do that. What is that term? What's the date? The date is such and such, whatever this weekend's date is. That's when they can start moving some stuff in. They have access for, and let me explain to you let me back up for a tenth of a second here. And that is that the reason that I'm not a big fan of this is because I've seen more than once in my real estate career, and certainly more than once in other people's real estate careers that I've been involved with, that something happens. And I've seen everything from a fire to a pipe burst that caused water damage, that did all kinds of things. Okay, so I've also seen a garage that was supposed to be moved into, but there was no occupancy. This was for storage only. And I went over to the house to double check on it a few days prior to closing. And they were in the garage only. However, the garage was obviously set up to where they were living in it. And what I mean by living in it is, I mean, they had a refrigerator, they had a bedroom set, they had a TV mounted on the wall. So they had turned that basically into a one-room apartment. Now, that in and of itself wouldn't be a bad thing, but what do they use? How many of you have toilets and water and showers and things like that in your garage? So it seems to me like probably they were using some of the things in the garage, in the house, which they were not supposed to have access to. I've seen damage done because somebody decided to hang something, and one of them was a TV actually. And gosh, we had more holes in the walls. Now the buyer says, well, yeah, it's okay, it's gonna be my property anyway. Well, that's true, probably, but what if something happened that it fell apart? And now you have all this stuff. Now you have stuff mounted on walls. Now you have stuff moved in. Now you have all these things in. And now you had to be given time to get out and things. So I'm not saying that you can't do this, because that's certainly not the case. It's not my house, so it's not up to me to make that decision. But I need to try to curtail the possibility of damage and things. So anyway, is there consideration? Well, if it's only a couple of days worth of storage, maybe there's not consideration. Maybe there is. Maybe it's going to be for a couple of weeks and you need to charge them. I don't know. Who knows what that charge is? What do you think is acceptable? Make sure that they understand, and it's going to explain it down here, damage and insurance and things, is that if there's any loss in the house, if there's anything that happens in the house, if there's any liability issues, somebody falls down the stairs, somebody has a garage door fall on their head, who knows what's going to happen? But if there's anything that happens while they're in the house, the homeowner, in this case the seller, still has insurance for basic things. If there's property damage, his homeowner's insurance will not cover that if they find out about it, if they figure out what's going on. If the caseworker comes out and says, well, nobody lives there. If they look at the records, county records, and see that possession hasn't changed yet. So the idea is, and it says it right here, each party is to carry their own insurance, which means that a potential buyer would have to go out and probably get a policy. Maybe they could add it to their homeowner's policy, that if they've already paid for it, if it's already in place because they're getting ready to move, whatever, or not, but it has to be identified to make sure that their property is taken care of. Okay, now here's the next one. See, this first one was for storage. Now this one is buyer early occupancy addendum. So now I don't have a place to live. I don't know what I'm going to do. We have to be out of our house by the 10th, and this isn't supposed to close until the 17th because we ran into some loan issues and had to renegotiate a couple of things and blah, 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 blah. All of these things that can come up. So this, again, if the seller is amenable, gives the buyer rights to move in to the property ahead of time. However, it all has to be in writing and it has to be identifiable. So here, buyers granted possession of the property beginning 10 calendar days before close of escrow, or on a specific date, if that's better. And this agreement will terminate on the close of escrow. Buyer has no right to remain in possession beyond this term unless escrow has been extended by mutual agreement or something else is going on. Buyer may be responsible for court costs and any other things. So what we're going to do is that we're gonna let them move in 10 days early. However, it's gonna cost them because guess what? The seller is still making mortgage payments, right? Because it hasn't closed yet. So their payoff hasn't been done. Who's making all of the utility payments? Who's doing the maintenance? Who's doing the alterations? Who's doing all of these different things? Who's taking care of the insurance? So this identifies all of those things. Understand, and it says it right up here at the top, is that this is for pre-closing possession of 29 or fewer days. For a buyer, pre-closing occupancy of 30 or more days, we have a different agreement for it called an interim occupancy, which actually moves them into a tenant landlord situation. So if it's 30 days or more, then they are tenants. They may still be buyers, but they're tenants right now. So those things fall into play right now if we're going to let you move in, and we're going to ask you for, and I don't know what that number is because it depends on how big the house is, how much the mortgage is, how much the insurance is, how much everything is, but say it's just, I don't know, say it's $150 a day. So that comes out to about $4,500 a month, but we're not going to be there a whole month. We're only going to be there 10 days. And anyway, this fee shall not be applied to the purchase price. So if you're selling it for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, it's not that it becomes an extra $4,500 for sales price. This is specifically for the right of living there. And we can either, and this is the one, if you're going to do this, and again, I throw a big if in there, but buyers shall pay this fee immediately upon entering. So if it's going to be $150 a day and you expect to be there 10 days, that's $1,500. Pay it before you move in, just like you would if you were a tenant. You'd move it before, you'd pay it before you moved in, right? So they can also ask for a deposit amount. And the deposit might be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever. It depends on the value of the home and things. But you have a deposit amount that says, you know, if there's anything wrong with it during time there and you break anything and stuff, I have a deposit to cover some of the things. Right? And that's what you're looking for. Who's going to pay utilities? Who's going to take care of maintenance? This says buyers shall not assign or sublet. That'd be pretty nervy for somebody to move into the house and then turn around and rent one of the bedrooms to their sister. And they're not part of the original agreement. So now the deal doesn't close, the buyer moves out, and the sister decides that she's going to stay for a while. Now what do? Well, we don't do anything because they were not allowed to do that in the first place. So, and insurance, we already talked about that. Okay. This is a generic, I think it's funny that they even named it that, but it's a generic addendum. And basically, it can be for listing agreements, it can be for purchase agreements, it can be for representation agreements, it can be for tenant agreements, it can be for whatever between a principal and a principal. And the principal could be brokers, or it could be agents, or it could be a seller and a buyer, or it could be whatever. But here, you write whatever those modifications are. And you move forward. Now, usually, if it's a time modification or something, you will use that one that we already talked about, which is the extension of time. But this is the reason it's left wide open, because there's always somebody that says, well, can we do this? Well, we can write it down and see if the other party agrees to it. So here's the extension of time addendum. And you can see that the extension of time addendum is between two parties on a specific address. The extension of escrow, scheduled close of escrow is extended to such and such a date. Extension of contingencies. So we've got contingencies. We haven't been able to get our investigations done. We don't have our loan in place. The appraisal hasn't been done yet. Whatever. Then you can put whatever those are, because it leaves a place for other. So whatever contingency that you can't remove for whatever reason, you can put that in there. And if everybody agrees to extend it to this new date here, then that's extended to the new date. We haven't been able to get our investigations done. Okay, so how much time do you need? Well, he said he could be out there Thursday. All right, so we can, but it was due today. So we can extend that until Friday or something, just to make sure that they have enough time to accomplish it. We don't have to, but we can. And other extensions, basically anything that you have going on that has a time commitment to it can be extended. And this offer is like a new offer. It's not a whole new offer, but it says it's got some dates and contract things in there, so it's a little bit of a new offer. And we need to have those things taken care of. You need to agree to it, or we're gonna move ahead with cancellation, or whatever the case may be, because now we have put ourselves in a position to do a notice of buyer to perform or a notice of seller to perform and move forward. And I think that's the last one for today. So we've covered in the last two classes, Friday and again today, we've covered about probably 20 different amendments and addendums, extensions of time, requests for different things. We haven't gotten into repair requests and things. We're going to get into those things pretty quick. But I hope that if nothing else, it impresses upon you the fact that whatever it is that we do, we need to have in writing. And we need to have it signed by the principals. It does not become an amendment or an addendum unless both principals have signed off on it. Now, the principals are different people, different times. A principal could be a buyer and a seller. It could be a seller and their agent if there were some amendments or addendums to how much commission we're going to pay or things like that. Then it could be that way. It could be between a buyer and an agent as far as buyer representation and things. But understand that every one of those principles in every different situation both have to sign regarding that specific thing. So whoever is involved, they are the principals. Sometimes it's an agreement strictly between a buyer and a seller, like this one that we're hovering on right now. This extension of any of these times, okay, these are all contractual. And somebody needs extra time to accomplish some of those. But it's not up to us as the agent to decide that that's okay. It's up to us as the agent to prepare an extension of time. And when you do those kind of things, on any extension that you're asking for, on any type of a change, don't wait until the last minute. What if they say no? What if the other party says no? We're not going to do that. We're sticking with all the original dates. Well, if you don't find that out until day 30 of a 35-day escrow, you may not have time to accomplish the other things. You may have if you're giving enough time. So if you're given enough time to get a new loan or get some extra down payment money from the bank of dad or something like that, then things like that can happen. But if you don't let people know, I always hate to see it when somebody needs an extension of time on a close of escrow. And I hate that anyway, but in particular, I hate it when I get the extension of time on the day before escrow is supposed to close. Well, how come somebody didn't let me know that ahead of time? How come somebody didn't tell me that we were having problems? How come somebody didn't send me some of these notifications and some of these requests before that day? Because once I get an extension of time agreement, for whatever it happens to be, especially if it's close of escrow, I have other people that have to know about it, right? I've got people that have to move. I've got people that have a moving van coming in. We got buyers that maybe have moving vans lined up, but I certainly have a seller who's got something lined up to get them out of the house and things in time. We may have utilities being changed over. We may have all kinds of things that are happening. But give us enough time to make sure, give the other agent enough time to make sure that they can resolve those things ahead of time. Or maybe even give the seller a chance to just say, heck with it, this is like the third extension we've given them, and I'm not giving another extension. And that is their decision. It's their house. right? It's the seller's house, the buyer's trying to get it. If they need more time for something, we look into it, we find out if that time is necessary. If somebody tells me we're having trouble getting a loan together, we're waiting for some lenders or some letters from some creditors saying that something was paid off, we have to do we have to redo the credit, whatever. I need to have time to know those things. I need to contact a bank or a lender or whatever. If they tell me that they need more time for a loan, I don't accept that as just being, I need more time for a loan. I want to know why. And so it gives me time as an agent to find out all the whys and the wherefores and the ins and outs prior to the day before escrow is supposed to close. Well, Terry, the deal's supposed to close on the 4th, but they're not ready to go yet, so it's probably not going to close for a few more days. Well, today's the 4th. Is that the day to find out that it's not going to close? I probably already know that it's not going to close because the escrow company has said, we haven't gotten the loan docs yet. Well, do you think that'd be a good time to consider getting extensions instead of waiting until the last minute? And so make sure whichever side of these you're on, that you give the other side ample time to make a decision and to either move forward or get out of the way. And that's kind of what we're looking for with all of these things. Everything can be amended if both parties agree. Time can be extended if both parties agree. And we just need to understand that that's what amendments and addendums and counteroffers, that's what all of those things are for. Is there to give us that option to change contracts. And that's why I say on that very first page, it takes more to, there's more to a contract. Takes more to make, just takes more. If you ever just had an RPA and that was the only thing that went out, and then a few disclosures later, it'd be wonderful. Be wonderful for us, paperwork wise, time wise, everything. All right. So we're done with addendums and amendments. Friday and today we were able to finish all of that up. And next contract class, I don't know, it's probably this week sometime, but I'm not sure what we're covering. I know that there's a foundations class tomorrow that is going to talk about something. I think it has to do with predictive scheduling. So if nobody has any questions, it's 11:24. We'll all go back to work. All good? All righty.